In this video, we're going to go over simplifying expressions that have negative exponents. So first example, 3x to the power of -5, all in brackets, squared. First, we have to use exponent laws. We have these brackets. We have exponents on either end. So we're going to be squaring everything inside the brackets. First thing we have to do is we have to square that 3. So 3 squared is 9. And now we have to square this variable. And with the exponent laws, we're going to be multiplying these two exponents together. So -5 times 2 is -10. So it's going to be x to the power of -10. In these questions, we're going to be simplifying expressions with negative exponents until there are no negative exponents left. So if there is an exponent, we need to turn it into a positive one. So we're not quite done yet. We've dealt with that square, but we have this negative exponent and we want to get rid of it. Now, how would we get rid of this? Remember, if we have something like x to the power of -2, I can actually turn that exponent into a positive by making it its reciprocal or its multiplicative inverse. So what I mean by that is we are going to make it 1 out of x to the power of +2. So to go from a negative exponent and making it positive, we just turn into the reciprocal. Or sometimes you'll hear me say inverse. So the same thing here. To get rid of this -10 exponent, we're going to have 9, leave it where it is, times, and I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal and turn the 10 into a +10. So it's 9 times 1 over x to the power of 10. Now we can clean this up a little bit, simplify things, because we know 9 times 1 is 9. And we leave the bottom, the denominator, as x to the power of 10. Perfect. And that's simplifying negative exponents until we have no more negative exponents. All right, here's another question. We have x to the power of -3 divided by y to the power of -2. Again, we want to simplify this and make sure there are no negative exponents remaining. So in this case, we just have two different variables with negative exponents, and we need to get rid of those negative exponents. Now, I'm going to show you kind of the long way of doing this. So if we look at just the numerator here, the very top, we have x to the power of -3, and I can get rid of that negative by writing the inverse. So in this case, it's not x to the power of -3, it's actually going to be 1 over x to the power of +3. And we can do that also with the denominator. We can go, instead of y to the power of -2, we just find the inverse, 1 over y to the power of +2. All right. Whenever you want to turn a negative exponent into a positive exponent, it's just 1 over whatever it is. Now this looks really messy. Okay. This looks terrible, but we can actually simplify this. So what we have here is a fraction divided by another fraction. So we have a fraction divided by another fraction. Now, you've probably seen this before in a different way, and I'll write it off to the side. If you have a fraction, like 1 over x to the power of 3 divided by 1 over y to the power of 2. In the past, when you had a fraction divided by another fraction, you probably learned what you can do is you can keep this first fraction the same. You can flip the second fraction upside down and turn it into multiplication. So what we're going to do in this case is keep this first fraction the same. We are going to flip and multiply. And here we get 1 times y to the power of 2, which is just y to the power of 2, which is just x to the power of 3. So that's what we are going to end up with our answer. When we have a fraction divided by a fraction, just flip the second fraction and multiply. And we have y squared over x to the power of 3. So what we notice is x to the power of negative 3 to become positive has now jumped to the bottom of the fraction, and y to the power of negative 2 to become positive has jumped to the top of the fraction. So if you remember, to change a negative exponent to a positive, you just have to switch the spot in the fraction. It becomes really easy to see. All right, here we have a much bigger expression. We have multiple a variables, multiple b's, so we're going to have to simplify that. We also have a lot of negatives, especially this negative over here. And when you're first looking at this, it's going to look a little bit scary, but once you understand the basic rules, it becomes a little bit easier. Now, the first thing I'm going to deal with is this negative 2 exponent that applies to everything. You're going to look at that at first and be like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that, but we know we can actually simplify this by turning it into positive just by making everything it's applied to an inverse. So in this case, I'm just going to go 1 over all that stuff and this is going to go from negative to a positive exponent. Now, it might even look a lot worse to some of you, but we're going to clean this up in a moment. So what's going to happen is, since we have 1, which is the same as 1 over 1, we actually have a fraction divided by another fraction. And how we can simplify it is just flipping that second fraction. So this second fraction is going to be flipped upside down. And it's going to look like that. And it's going to look like that. So a lot of people, when they're thinking about this, they actually just skip that middle step and they kind of think, when I have a negative exponent, things just get kind of flipped around a little bit. So I know it looks like a lot of stuff has been going on, but it's fairly simple to remember. When you have a negative exponent and you want to turn it to a positive one, all you have to do is kind of flip things around. So everything that was on the bottom of this fraction is now on the top, and everything that was on the top is now on the bottom. So that's finding the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal. We're just turning everything kind of upside down. Now we're going to continue up here, and we just need to square everything. So Even though this is a positive, we still need to square it. We need to square everything within the brackets. And what we have is 8 squared is 64. Now, when we're dealing with the variables, because we have this bracket here, we're actually going to use exponent laws and we're going to multiply the exponents. So in this case, for the a, it's to the power of 2, and we're going to multiply it with this 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. It becomes a to the power of 4. And b, we have a negative 2 times 2 is b to the power of negative 4. Again, these are just exponent laws. We also need to square everything on the bottom. And we get 4 squared is 16. E to the power of negative 3 squared, we're just going negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. And b to the power of 4, we're just going 4 times 2. So it's b to the power of 8. All right, so we're getting closer. We still need to simplify things. I'm going to deal with the coefficients. 64 divided by 16 is 4. Well, how are we going to deal with these variables? Well, one thing I've told you is if we have a negative exponent, we can turn it into a positive by finding the multiplicative inverse or the reciprocal, as it's called. So just 1 over that. Now, when we have a bunch of stuff in a fraction, we can turn this negative exponent into a positive just by flipping it to the other side. So this a to the power of negative 6 can become positive by flipping it to the top. And also this b to the power of negative 4, we can make into a positive 4 just by flipping it to the denominator. Again, that's kind of what we saw over here. Everything on top ended up on the bottom, and everything on the bottom ended up on top. So in this case, a to the power of 4 is going to stay there. But this a to the power of negative 6, I'm going to bring to the top of my fraction. And since I'm doing that, it is going to become a positive. Now on the bottom of my fraction, I have b to the power of 8. But I also have this b to the power of negative 4 on top. But I can bring it to the denominator just by turning it into a positive. So this becomes b to the power of positive 4. So we just kind of flip things around a little bit. Now we can continue to simplify. I have a's that I can put together, and we do this since it's multiplying, we add the exponents. So it becomes 4 times a to the power of 10 over, same thing here, we're adding the exponents, b to the power of 12. And that is how we simplify this expression.